excavating out this great big lake, they'd been left to their own devices, really. But there was still a remains of one of these silted up mill lates there, and as the machines were digging away at this particular area of ground, one of the machine operators noticed the remains of a boat. Unfortunately, it was only half the boat, and the other half presumably was in a pile of earth that had been carted off, earlier on and missed. But yes, what they did find was a clinker built, so built out of the planks overlapping, very traditional technique, and just one pointy end of the boat. We can't say which end it was, because it's likely that it was probably symmetrical in plan, probably had a pointy end at each end, if you like.
I see, yeah.
Quite a shallow draft, and was probably just used as a punt, really. Perhaps for wild fowling, going up and down that short stretch of river, perhaps doing a bit of fishing or fishing for eels and so on. It's unlikely they would have travelled much further, because of course there were mills dotted all the way along this bit of the Ousel during the late medieval period, when the boat was found to date to.
So what kind of dates have they put on it?
Well, normally you'd think that they would use tree ring dating or dendrochronology to date something like that, a nice well-preserved wooden find. But unfortunately, because of the way it was sawn kind of across the grain of the planks, through sawn as they call it, there weren't enough rings to actually match up to give a date there, so it was radiocarbon dated, or C14 dated, and that gave a date of around 1540, which places it into the late medieval period, and makes it really quite an unusual find, particularly in an inland context.
So just chancing upon a 500-year-old piece of boat. Indeed,
yes. I mean, it had probably rotted or been preserved where it was left, because it was found with a length of chain and a mooring spike, which would have been presumably used to attach it to the bank. So perhaps it got hold one day and was just left there to moulder in the shallows, or perhaps it was just forgotten about.
Now, is that something else that's under the water, or is it preserved somewhere?
No, it's long gone. I mean, it was the excavation, because with it being such a specialist find, was undertaken by people from the National Maritime Museum, who obviously travelled some distance to come and deal with it, and it was given the same treatment that the Mary Rose has been given, where it's been soaked in a solution of polyethylene glycol, or PEG, until eventually that replaces the water molecules within the wood, and just leaves the cellulose and a kind of plasticizing resin in there, and then you can freeze dry it and put it on display. So I think it's now within the County Museum collection.
Okay, so it has been preserved and it is on display.
It's not on display at the moment, as far as I'm aware, but it's certainly capable of being displayed now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
You wanna be an angel, you wanna be a star, you wanna play some magic on my guitar, you wanna be a poet, you wanna be my string, you could be anything. Do you wanna be the lover of another? Undercover, you could even be the man on the moon. Do you wanna be the player? Do you wanna be the string? Let me tell you something, it just don't mean a thing. You see, it really doesn't matter when you're buried in disguise by the dark glass on your eyes. Though your flesh has crystallized, still you turn me on. Still you turn me on. You turn me on. You wanna be the pillow where I lay my head? Do you wanna be the feathers lying in my bed? Do you wanna be a color cover magazine? Create a scene. every day a little sadder, a little madder. Someone get me a ladder. Wanna be the singer, wanna be the song. Let me tell you something, you just couldn't be more wrong. You see, I really have to tell you that it all gets so intense. From my experience, it just doesn't seem to make sense. Still, you turn me on.
So that was Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Still, you turn me on. I'm going for the tenuous connections there, Shirley, because, well, Nick and I went for a turn around the lake.
Oh, grown, nothing changes.
Thank you. I'll move on. So, we heard in the interview Nick mentioned that amazing fossil, the skeleton of a prehistoric creature that was found in Caldecott Lake. It is an ophthalmosaurus, a type of ichthyosaur. These words. Ophthalmosaurus means eye lizard. It's called that because it had very big eyes, and when it was found locally, it was called Big Eye. Now you can see this fossil, this skeleton, displayed on the wall in the reference library of Milton Keynes Central Library. It's 10 feet or so long, quite amazing, and amazing to think that it swam here over 150 million years ago. That's old.
That's incredible. Yeah, that's actually older than you.
Thank you, Shirley.
Which gives you an idea of the sort of programmes that we have in mind. We're really appreciative of the great response we had from the pilot show from last week. So thank you to all of those of you who listened, and hopefully people are tuning in again. So what it's all about, if you have ideas of something from Milton Keynes that predates 1967, we'd love to hear from you, because we'd be delighted to come out, do an interview, so that we can let more people know what a fabulous town we're living in. It isn't all just modern and concrete cows. It has some amazing history.
And as an example of that, we're going to go back to my stroll with Nick. We walked a little way from the lake to the nearby site of, would you believe, a medieval hamlet. So we've moved on. Where are we now? I'm looking at to me it looks like a large Humpty Bumpty field, but...
Well, that's a very good description of it, Steve, but these humps and bumps have quite a lot of significance. This area marks the location of Caldecott hamlet, which is it's a hamlet. It was part of the broader parish and would have been subservient to the village of Bow Brickhill, which is just off to the southeast a ways. And as we saw earlier, there was a moated manor house off to one side of the village, and if we just walk across the site here, you can probably see cut through this on this little path which cuts through. You can see the ground rising and dropping again here. So just where we are right now, we're just in the beginnings of the open fields that would have surrounded this hamlet and would have been farmed by the peasants that lived here. These humps and bumps here are what we call ridge and furrow. It's a remnant of the traditional ox-drawn ploughing. Created the distinctive rises and drops in the field, that kind of corrugated effect that you see preserved in pasture land. As we head on a bit, you see the ground drops away again here, and we're into the start of the village proper, and you can probably see each side of us little depressions and rises. Well, these higher bits are what we call house platforms, and each one of them probably held a small single-storey cottage, perhaps with a byre or a place for the livestock at one end, and a cross passage going through, a door at the front, a door at the back, and a living quarters, a chamber at the other end, which would have been shared by all the family. Probably stone foundations, and then walls perhaps made of cob or timber framed with wattle and daub infill, and then a thatched roof. So it's a mixture of perhaps clay and dung and so on. Just what we call mass walling technique. There's not much really good stone around here. The only stone buildings you tend to see are either very high status manor houses or of course the medieval churches that dot the area.
Of course.
And as we continue along the path here, you can see we're coming just into this very long linear depression here, and this would have been the main drag, the roadway, forming what we call a holloway.
We sort of arrived at a T-junction of paths.
That's right. Yes, yeah. It forms what we call a holloway. We've been worn away just by the passage of traffic. Of course, they didn't metal the roads very much in these days. And if you think of horses and carts and people and livestock coming back up and down here for a couple of 100 years, very quickly wears away the surface.
So how many hundreds of years ago are we talking about?
Well, the manor itself is referenced first in 1208 with the grant of a mill there. Say that the manor house, which was excavated in part over on the moated site
where we began.
Yes, just by Caldicot Lake there. That was dated to 1641, but the village itself, in the medieval period, it showed two main periods of activity from the mid 12th to late 13th century when the excavations which they did just where the housing is off to the south there on the site revealed this holloway being laid out and the plough furrows and so on with the open fields.
So mid 12th century, we're talking 1150 plus or minus.
That's right. Yes.
We're talking getting not quite 900 years ago.
The beginnings of activity here, if you like, at that period. Wow. It's later on in the 13th and 14th century that the village itself appears to be laid out, and you get these little crofts, these little enclosures with the houses. Each croft containing a building, probably a cottage with a small family unit there. They begin to be laid out, and then that persists into the late 14th century, and then moving into the early 15th century we start to see signs of abandonment. So actually, all told, really the village itself, the hamlets here, represented by these earthworks, was only in existence from the late 13th through to the early 15th century. So it's actually it's just 150 years maximum, just a few generations probably here.
Do we know why they're abandoned?
Probably probably some of the climatic deteriorations, the Little Ice Age and so on, the Black Death, and then and generalised changes in farming, in land management, where people were probably taking this more marginal land out of use as arable, perhaps putting sheep on it. So the people here, who you have to remember, were probably in service to the Lord of the Manor, etc. If the Lord of the Manor decides that they don't want to farm it in this way before, they don't want to be bothered with tenants, they'd rather have a few hundred sheep and a couple of shepherds, so be it. And perhaps that played its part too.
They didn't issue redundancy notices in those days, did they?
Well, that's it. No no notice, no thanks.
Now, was this area then, was it excavated, was it looked at by the archaeological guys?
Well, the area that's been preserved here wasn't actually excavated very much at all, but some of the housing we see around and off
this is the new
south
estates.
and the east, the new estates of Caldicot, they encroached partly onto this site, and there were some limited excavations there. They did helpfully give us these dates for the start of the development in the medieval period, and for its its abandonment and decline in